Welcome to the Gym Plus Coffee podcast. Welcome to episode 1. I'm Ian, producer of the podcast and member of the Gym Plus Coffee community team. On this week's episode, co-founder Diarmuid McSweeney sits down and talks about the importance of breathwork with Níall Ó'Murchú. Neal has been working in wellness for over 20 years. He's a level 3 Wim Hof instructor, which is the highest level an instructor can reach. He runs breathwork workshops and has worked with some high-profile people and teams throughout his career. He's also the author of the best-selling book, The Blissful Breath. In this episode, Neal discusses the importance of breathwork and how slowing down in all aspects of life can have a massive impact. Hope you guys enjoy.
Neal, very welcome to the Gym Plus Coffee podcast. Thanks so much for joining us. We're privileged that you're here. You're a leader in your space. I'm really looking forward to having this conversation.
Yeah, and thanks very much for the invitation and the very kind words. I appreciate them.
Great. Congratulations on a recent award at the Make Life Richer Awards, Best Outdoor Experience. I'm really looking forward to getting into that. I think from all the things that we've seen on Instagram and for obviously the thousands of people that have been at that experience, it's been very special because you can see the feedback that you're getting. So I'm really, really looking forward to chatting about that and all the great work that you're doing with Christine. Before we get into that, I guess, from doing my research and chatting to you a little bit now, you have gone on an incredible journey, I would say, from maybe hardcore international sport, excelling as an athlete to where you are now. Could you, possibly in a short space of time,
in 10 seconds, tell us how,
give us a sense of that journey and the different kind of milestones along the way and how that's changed, and I suppose how your own interpretation of your health, fitness, wellness has changed over the years.
So the dream when I was a youngster was always to be a professional basketball player. So that was the obsession, in the first part of my life. But as I kind of continued on through my teenage years, I always had these big questions about who am I? Who are you? What is this existence? These big philosophical questions that most people think about at some stage. And as I went through my kind of basketball career, these questions got bigger and bigger and louder. And then I think I was about maybe 19 or 20. And at that stage, I'd been the youngest person on the senior Irish team. I'd been the only person in international competition to be the highest scorer in the European Championships. All these kind of things. But in the back of my mind were these massive, massive questions. So I made a decision then that I had to go off and find the answers to them. At that stage, I didn't think that sport had the answer to those questions. Now, from a kind of wiser, older position, I do realize that the sport probably does have the answer to those questions. But at that stage, I just felt I had to leave it all behind. And that led me initially into martial arts and then into yoga, meditation, breathing, and it kind of I just followed this curiosity that I had about these big questions, about consciousness, about what makes us human, what's the relationship between the mind and the brain and the breath and all these kind of questions. And that's how it started, and that's how the transition happened. It was just that I had this need to go and answer these questions. I don't have the answers still, but what it did was it opened me up to life, because as an international athlete, your life is very, very narrow and focused on performing. That's it. But of course, life is richer than that. So that's where it all started.
Very interesting. And what was that first departure when you kind of made the decision, right, I'm not going to commit as much anymore now to this athlete life, which, as you say, we know it takes its toll on people, and it's very hard to stay on that path. What was the first step out of that? Because
I love physical training. Still, I love what it feels like. And for me, the first step was into martial arts. So it was something that martial arts, now we all know mixed martial arts. We know the UFC. We know those things. They're part of our culture. But 20 odd years ago, they were not. It was just starting. But martial arts then you had different types of martial arts. And, you know, martial arts for some people could be just exercise or a way of learning self-defense. But at the fundamental level, most martial arts are based in some philosophy, some way of seeing life. Most martial arts are a code of behavior as well. And that appealed to me because it was still the physical training that I needed. It was then also a philosophy, a way of understanding what we are and who we are and how to behave. So that was the first step. So back in the very, very early days, John Kavanagh, who's now famously Conor McGregor's coach and everything, John back then was the first person in Ireland to try and pull together martial arts in what is now MMA. So I used to go train with them like a long time ago. And then I read in one of those kind of men's magazines from the late 90s, like GQ or something, that the Shaolin Temple in China, which is would argue is the birthplace of all martial arts, they were sending one of their Buddhist monks, who was also this combat champion, to London to set up a temple in London. So that was it. I said, right, I'm going to London with the idea that I would go to the Shaolin monks there in the temple in Kentish Town, North London, to learn how to fight. Because for me, fighting was like the ultimate form of competition, having been on a basketball court all my life. But when I got there, they decided that they wouldn't teach me how to fight. They'd teach me how to breathe and to meditate, and the fighting would come after. So that was the first experience I had of breathing and its effect on how we live and on our mind, and my first experience of meditation. And then that led to learning how to fight. But of course, you know, being Buddhist monks as well, they're always teaching us that, you know, you learn how to fight so you never have to fight. So by learning how to fight, by being in the fire of battle all the time, you don't then have this desire to prove yourself. So your life becomes more peaceful because you're putting yourself in these situations all the time. Okay,
very interesting. So you mentioned obviously breath work and meditation there. In some ways, you're kind of becoming known in Ireland as that breath work and maybe ice bath guy.
Yes, of course.
on
Absolutely.
TV.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that? Well, maybe first a bit of an introduction for some people that may not know. You know, tell us about just the importance of breath work and how that is now an exercise, let's say, in itself that people are really getting into. But then maybe tell us as well about how you and others, I'd imagine, started to introduce that into Ireland. Like, you know, how did you start to get that out there, and how's it grown since then?
So for some people, it might seem like a strange combination, you know, breathing exercises and freezing cold. And in my study of this over the years, eventually what I realized was that at the beginning of our life, there is that connection. So when we're in our mother's womb, our mother is breathing for us. When we're born, then it's the shock of the cold that triggers our first breath, that opens our lungs, that brings us alive. So even in a warm country, the shock of the cold that we come out of when we're born is the thing that triggers our life. So at the very beginning of our life, there's an intrinsic link between the breath and the cold. Now, most people spend their life then trying to avoid the cold. But ultimately, to feel whole and to improve our health and to kind of be resilient to the pressures of life, the breath and the cold have to be learned we need to learn how to use them as a force for good in our life again. So that's why, say in COVID, you can see this massive surge in people swimming in the sea. They may not remember that the cold triggered their first breath and brought them alive, but there was a need. They felt a need to do something, and the cold was there. So over my years now teaching the Wim Hof method, which is breathing and cold, breathing an ice bath, like I was in an ice bath this morning, you see people looking for answers to questions that they have, maybe about their health or maybe about how to deal with the pressure that they face. And if you look just below the surface, how we breathe is how we feel. So if a person is feeling very stressed, their breathing reflects that. But if a person is feeling calm, their breathing also reflects that. And the brilliant part of it is, in any moment, we can consciously change how we breathe, and that changes how we feel. So the breath gives us this choice, no matter what's happening, to change how we feel in that moment. And then, of course, the cold has all these amazing physiological benefits. It reduces stress, it reduces inflammation, it reduces pain, it gives us more energy, it balances hormones, it improves our circulation. You know, it's nearly endless how good the cold is for us. But ultimately, the cold is teaching us how to breathe in a stressful situation. When you get into the cold, anyone who's jumped into the sea knows, like, and you lose your breath. But when you learn to find your breath and calm your breath in the cold, so this is where we guide people through, say, an ice bath, and people are terrified of the ice and they don't want to do it. But at the end of our workshop, when the person is able to get into the cold, feel that shock, but be able to find their breath, and they're sitting in an ice bath with 40 kgs of ice on their chest and their neck, and they're calmly breathing, and they feel a sense of control and calm, then they know that they can find that sense of control and calm under any pressure.
Okay. And for people who, they might know about this, or they might see people doing more and more of it on social media, maybe at a personal level, like, how do you incorporate, apart from the work you do with other people, how do you incorporate it into your day to make it very practical for people? Like, when do you do it? And what do you think personally is kind of, what has it given you the tools to address, or what does it help you balance?
So where it all came together for me is at a time, I have 4 children. Now they're a bit old, they're teenagers now, but at the time we had 4 children under the age of 4. So myself and my wife were really struggling with the relentlessness of that. And we had a few tragedies, people we loved in the family died, it was a difficult time. And so we started doing a little bit of breathing. So we get the children to bed, the house would be in bits, we clean up the house, we get it ready for the next day, and we take about 5 or 10 minutes to do some breathing together. And it started to change how we felt immediately. We started to feel more calmer, we started to have more energy with the children. It started to improve our health. And after we did a little bit of breathing, we go up into the cold shower at night, just a short little cold shower, 20 seconds, 30 seconds. Totally and utterly grim and difficult to do at night, but we felt so profoundly different. It improved our health. It helped us deal with the grief that we were facing. It helped us deal with the relentless pressure of all the little children. It made me a better dad and a better person and a better husband. And it was so simple, so anybody's listening to this and think, okay, I want a little bit of that. Enjoy your beautiful hot shower. We've evolved over millions of years to be able to press a button and hot water comes out. So enjoy the heat. And at the end, just turn it to cold. Feel that shock, and feel your breath being taken away, and just try to find your breath again and just try to calm your breath down. And within that moment, when your breath is calm and you're in control again in the cold, these amazing physiological benefits are taking place. So your hormones are balancing, your circulation is improving. When you can learn to find that breath in the cold, the science shows us that inflammation is going down in the body for 6 days afterwards. 6 days afterwards. So if we think about inflammation as both the cause and effect of some of the biggest diseases that we face, being able to just turn your shower to cold for a few seconds and find a sense of calm and have this inflammation reducing in the body is life-changing for people. So that little bit of cold at the end of their hot shower is enough to get started and enough to see massive changes within a few days.
That's amazing, yeah. It's powerful. I suppose that kind of brings me on slightly to Wim Hof in a way, and I think for a couple of years there you were known as the Wim Hof guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
You've obviously started to kind of list out some of the benefits there, and I'm sure there are probably people listening that they've started to see Wim Hof more, and he's become maybe a bit more of a personality.
Yeah.
And I suppose it would be interesting if you had any anecdotes about that. But I suppose maybe could you tell us more about those benefits and why do you think now, like, because he's been doing this for decades, why do you think now it's becoming more mainstream and I suppose, what are the things that you've learned from some of those training programs that you've done?
So I've been very lucky to spend a good bit of time with Wim. At least twice a year I'm out with Wim on his winter adventures, teaching alongside him. So for anybody who might know who Wim Hof is, he originally became famous as this person who was holding maybe about 25 world records for doing incredible things like being encased in ice for 2 hours. He climbed up Mount Everest just in a pair of shorts with no gear, no oxygen, no safety. And eventually, Wim's story, the kind of catalyst for all of that stuff is very tragic. He had 4 young children and his wife had mental health problems. And one night she gave all the 4 children a little peck in the cheek, said goodnight, and walked up to the 8th story of their apartment block and jumped. So to help Wim deal with the tragedy of that and the heartbreak and to raising these children, he'd get in the cold. He'd get into frozen canals in Amsterdam, and in that cold, he couldn't think about the grief. And then out of that, he developed the breathing, and out of that, he developed this ability to do these superhuman things. But really, Wim's whole aim of doing these circus acts, is what he called them, these amazing feats of endurance, was to try and get the scientific community's attention. And eventually they did. And so they brought Wim in and they injected him with a form of E. coli, and he used his breathing to fight it off. He had no symptoms. So then, of course, they say, okay, well, maybe you're the exception that proves the rule. Can you do this with normal people? So that's where the methods kind of start to be developed. And Wim took a bunch of quote unquote normal people, trained them how to use the breath in the cold. They brought them into Radboud University in the Netherlands, injected them in the form of E. coli. They started to do the breathing and they were able to fight it off. So it was the first time in human history that we had seen people voluntarily being able to improve their immune system. Right. So that's huge. So we can voluntarily improve our immune system. Massive, especially say during COVID times, pre-COVID times, post-COVID times. As I said earlier, it has a huge effect on inflammation in the body. So that goes down. Massive effect on reducing stress and anxiety in people. It also increases our level of energy. So this was a big thing for Josie and I at the beginning of our journey with the Wim Hof method, is that with the 4 children, you're constantly kind of tired for years on end. But then all of a sudden I had energy again, because our breathing is, if our breathing is efficient, then we start to get oxygen down into the cells and create the energy we need. But if you're under stress, your breathing is kind of out of balance and you're not like that. So, so the reason it's starting now to really become more mainstream is that the scientific benefits are all proven. Wim wants there to be no question about the benefits of it. And it's taken a long, long time to get research done, to get peer-reviewed stuff published, and to get it out into the world. But still, most people never hear of that. But all of these small things, and Wim's relentless work online, in interviews, and he's a real character. He's this amazing kind of wild, loving kind of character. All of that, plus, on the ground level, we have, as instructors in the Wim Hof method, we are teaching and teaching and teaching all over the world. So there's people that are experiencing it in their own areas where they live, and then Wim is on bigger TV programs and everything, and all the science is there. So all these kind of factors are slowly pushing it into the mainstream.
And do you think it's accessible for everybody? Do you reckon everyone can get into it?
There are, if you're pregnant, you don't want to be doing kind of breathing, holding your breath. There's exceptions like that for children. You don't want to be holding their breath. So, but if a person is, for the majority of people, a little bit of breathing and a little bit of cold can dramatically improve our health.
Great. Well, you just see it everywhere now. When it was starting to become, it's just, we want to make sure that we bring, like with a lot of these trends, that we bring everyone with us as well, that everyone understands it, because can't just be in certain pockets. It feels like we need to reach out to make sure that everyone's learning the same
absolutely
benefits,
and especially when they're all proven, like it's all scientifically proven. So for anybody is looking to improve their immunity, anyone who's looking to improve their health or their mood or their strength, the cold and the breathing is a proven way to do all of that.
Can we talk about the full moon healing circle?
Yes, which is exactly what it's about.
It's incredible what you guys have grown. We were talking about it earlier. You know, the images on social media kind of stop you in your tracks. Those images of you standing with your hands in the air and the full moon in the background above the Killiney Bay, but the numbers of people now showing up to some of those, like I think you had more than 1,000 people on the beach in relatively cold weather, a couple of months ago, and I know there's another one this weekend. Can you talk to us about, I suppose, for people who haven't been there, what is that experience? But also, why do you think now these large numbers of people are coming? Because this is not a kind of a niche experience anymore. Yeah. This is huge numbers of people, and I know you told me that people travel from all corners of Ireland and people flew from the UK. You know, this is something much bigger now.
Yeah, and so Christine, she's Spiritual Wellness Christine on Instagram, started the Full Moon Healing Circle a couple of years back. And then she asked me would I get involved. You know, I had been running kind of smaller events. And the idea is that we just meet on the beach under the full moon once a month. And it's a chance for people to experience a little bit of breathing, yoga, meditation, and to get into the sea for a dip if they want to. It's really simple. So Christine and I, we guide people through the experience. And I think, which is very important, the main thing is about having a laugh, you know, just to come and enjoy yourself, and everyone is welcome. So that's kind of what we started out. And our intention is always for that people leave the beach, feeling a little better than when they arrived. And slowly over time, the numbers and the number of people coming to it has got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Now we engage with the guards to make sure the traffic is okay, because it's in Killiney and like the roads are tiny. We work with the Coast Guards. You know, we kind of do all those things, you know, to make sure it's a safe place for everybody. But I think it's touched on something maybe deeper in our society, which is after the last few years, people want human experiences. People want to share experiences with people. People want to meet other types of people who mightn't be into the same things, but are just there to experience it. And I think that is part of the reason why it started to draw so many people to it. Also, people are curious. Also, people, there's a much bigger trend in Ireland now, an openness to things that help us understand ourselves a little bit better. So let's say yoga or breathing or meditation. There's a much wider trend of people being interested in those things. And the Full Moon Healing Circle is just a really lovely experience where people can get a taste of it. They can get a taste of it. And like when we're there and there's 1,000 people, 1,200 people on the beach, it's just amazing to see that. And the numbers aren't important, but there's a definite feel of community when you're there with that many people, and every type of person you can imagine is down there. We have families with young children. We have elderly people that we have to help onto the beach. We have all ages, all sizes, all shapes, all professions, people coming from all over the world now. So they kind of organize their time in Ireland in order to go to that as well, you know, which is, they come up and tell us that, but it is incredible, you know. But it's, you know, it's not necessarily the Full Moon Healing Circle that's doing that. It's just this huge shift, I think, in how we want to live. Mm-hmm. And the Full Moon Healing Circle is just a very open, accessible way to experience that.
Well, I mean, so the Full Moon Healing Circle won Best Outdoor Experience at our awards recently, and it was cool that a lot of people were kind of thanking us on like Team Gym Plus Coffee, and like we didn't do anything. The awards were nominated by the community, and the winners were picked by the community because they got the vote. But that's the power of it, you know. It was you guys have obviously built that community, and then it, you know, those people showed up online and voted for you, which is what we think made the awards really powerful was that it was nominated by the community and voted for by the community. You've been on this 20-year journey, and you've been, I would say, probably more, let's say your profile has risen in recent years. I would say in the last 6 or 7 years, and obviously now even with these experiences. You mentioned it slightly there about what people are being more open to now. What do you think is happening kind of health and wellness trends wise in Ireland? Like what is this kind of change? Because we're connected to it in a small way with Gym Plus Coffee. You know, we can kind of see things that are happening in different parts of the country, and it's amazing that you can have these new conversations or see these new experiences that people are gravitating to. But as someone who's living and breathing it, what change is happening, or like what is going on, do you think?
So I can only give you an answer from my perspective. So when I left basketball and started to try and figure out these things, there was very few people that I would say to, okay, I'm going off to do this herbalism course in Mullingar where I'm learning how to use nettles and dandelion. You know, that just wasn't part of any conversation. You know, I would actually not say it to people because it was so far on the edges of what was kind of normal, quote unquote, back then. All that stuff now is just normal. You know, people talk about all different ways of healing the body, healing the mind, all different natural kind of ways of living. Part of me feels that this shift from it being on the fringes to being more mainstream is also a bigger shift in Irish society. Obviously, we've had some big referendum votes in the last while about equality for marriage, equality rights for everybody, and choices about information and choices about what we do. I think they are little signposts pointing us to this big change in Irish society, where we have pushed aside a lot of the cultural kind of control and oppression that might have been influencing us for the last 150 years, the church, for example. And by pushing that aside, we are now starting to live what I think is more in line with our true nature. I think Irish people are wild at heart. You know, we're an island people on the edge of Europe, out in the middle of the Atlantic. And I think we are now starting to see, the shift is that we are now starting to be who we actually are, which is an island people, which is a people surrounded by nature, which is a people surrounded by the sea, which is a people that are passionate, and people that are open-minded when we are given the chance to be. So I think in that massive shift in our society, openness to everything, openness to equality of marriage, openness to how we live, openness to how we look after ourselves and look after the people, that's part of that as well. And within that then, ways of healing, ways of understanding ourselves are just part of this change.
It's fascinating, yeah. It's great to hear, because you have been on that journey, you know, so you've been firsthand seeing the change in the last number of years. My final question is, we've our passion, I suppose, at Gym Plus Coffee is to make life richer and to build a community around that. The great thing is that everybody has different interpretations of what that means. We named the awards after it because it really is the beating heart, I guess, of everything that we do. What does that idea or those set of words mean to you? Make life richer, and please answer it any way you want. You know, you can define it or maybe just, you know, express your experience of maybe over the last couple of years. But what does that mean in the work that you do and the people that you're interacting with?
I think all the different practices that I've experienced over the years, there's one common thread amongst them all, which is the slowing down of us. When we slow ourselves down a little bit, the mind slows down, the mind opens up, our breath becomes calmer, and then everything becomes richer. So we can fly through life, cycling, drinking the coffee, on the phone at the same time, you know, or we can slow down and sit with the coffee and sit and watch life and just enjoy a few minutes of that kind of, you know, really experiencing what it is to be human. And I think when we slow down, life becomes richer, because it is multi-dimensional, colorful, beautiful experience. But obviously we have to live as well. So that's for me when what life should be like. Now, it doesn't always work. Slowing down is a practice. But that's what the richness of life is to me.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. And thanks for joining us in the podcast. Everything you've built with Christine is amazing. But thanks so much for sharing all your experiences for the last few years as well.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's a pleasure.
Cheers.